Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries, and in this video I'm going to be talking about what you can do when players are absent from one of your sessions. This is a subject I've been thinking about a lot recently, especially given that there seems to be a marked difference in the difficulty in getting a group of people together for an online session as opposed to a tabletop session. But that's a subject for a different video. So, what can you do when a player cannot make your game, or players? Well, here's my advice. There are a few things you can do, but first of all, and most importantly, don't blow your stack about it. Don't get annoyed or et up about it. It's quite an understandable reaction from GMs, since the majority of you have probably put an awful lot of time and or work into your games, and when you get contacted by players, especially if it's at the last minute, who suddenly tell you that for whatever reason they can't make your game, it can seem like you're being messed around and that the effort you've put into your game is not being appreciated. Before you go off the deep end, just take a deep breath, since that's probably not the case. Players and GMs alike have numerous priorities in their own lives and different degrees of skill in managing and organising those priorities. And for the vast majority of people, shocking although it may seem to some of us, role playing is probably not their number one priority. Any number of real life situations could contrive to ensure that their attendance at your game is not possible. Chances are they feel quite bad about letting you down as well. So keep calm. There's a few things you can do with regards to keeping your session going, if that's what you should choose to do. First of all, you may choose not to keep your session going. You may choose to reschedule the session for another day. And this is quite an easy method to approach and is normally used if your party or your group are at a crucial stage of the plot and you don't want to move on without the character who would otherwise be absent. This is great because it means that obviously when you do reschedule, all of the players will be there for the rescheduled session, as will their characters. However, it does mean you're back to square one and you have to start planning and organising the session all over again. There's also the danger, as more time goes on between sessions, that the details of what happened in the previous session start to get a little fuzzy in the memory of both players and GMs, and something of the immediacy of a fast-paced storyline can be lost, especially if your game only runs, say, bi-weekly or once a month. If you miss out one session, it may be a couple of months before you get to game again. The second option is to continue and soldier on without the absent player, but this then leaves the question of what do you do with their character whilst the player is unavailable. And there's a few different methods that you can take. I'm going to go into some of them now. Number one, the GM or another player can take control of their absentee player's character and keep them in the background. This is a good approach because it keeps the resources and the skills of the character at the availability of the party. However, it can be bad because when the missing player does return, obviously they haven't actually got the memories that would have accumulated during that session, and they will have to be refreshed by the other players. And unless handled carefully, it can result in ill feeling, especially if some misfortune or, God forbid, character death occurs on the character whilst their player is absent. 2. You can find an excuse to absent the character for the session. This obviously works really well and neatly avoids the problem of anything happening to that character whilst their player is absent. However, if the reasoning does not fit into the ongoing narrative of a game, it can become obvious that this is contrived and it can damage players' investment in the game. This works really well in a couple of scenarios, especially if the character was injured at the end or near the end of a session. The GM can simply announce that their injuries were more severe than they initially looked and that they've been left with some friendly NPCs in order to recuperate and then rejoin the party, obviously when the player can next make the game session. or if the PC has an enemy or an antagonistic force that can feasibly abduct or kidnap the character within the ongoing narrative. This can also be a great way of absenting them from a session and giving the rest of their party a goal to rescue said kidnapped character. However, this does need to be handled extremely carefully. It shouldn't be used as a stick to beat or punish the player who was not able to attend. It should rather be used as a method to throw a slightly different spin on the plot, to create a sense of urgency within the players, and to give them an immediate goal which they can deal with whilst the other player is not present. However, this method does also again deprive the party of the resources and the skills of the missing character. Or you could instead choose to run a side quest or a flashback for those players who are able to attend. If you really don't want to progress the storyline without the player who's going to be missing, or perhaps their character is crucial for it and you really want them to be there, then it may be possible, if the narrative permits, for you to run a flashback or a side story for those players who can make it. This may see them playing younger versions of themselves in the past or older versions in the future. It may even see them playing NPCs who've only tangentially been involved in the main plot so far. If you choose to do this, then you should make sure your side quest or flashback throws a new light or expands the plot in some way. Otherwise, it can just seem like something that's been bolted on last minute. It hasn't really been thought about. You might even use it to highlight a different viewpoint or cast a different light on your plot. For instance, if the player party are playing a typically heroic D&D party who have been busily throwing off these hobgoblin barbarians who've been attacking a local human kingdom, perhaps you run a side adventure where the players set aside their character for a session and they generate the hobgoblin warriors of the tribe who see these humans as interlopers and murderers who are attempting to throw them off their ancestral land that was justly taken from them by the human aggressors many centuries before. And this throws an entirely different spin on the plot for the players, if not for their characters. And it means that once the other player does return, you can carry on where you left off, but those players who did participate in this side quest or flashback will have some additional understanding of the world. You've enriched the narrative and their gaming experience. You've got them more involved with it. The last suggestion is just don't draw attention to the fact they're not there. This has the advantage of removing the character from the action, but it does also deprive the party of their abilities and resources. It also requires a certain level of willingness and buy-in from the playing group. They have to be willing to suspend their disbelief and selectively phase out their knowledge of the missing character's existence for the duration of the session or sessions in which they're missing. Although this can work with a party who are willing, not all groups may be comfortable doing this. So, what would I advise in a game? Well, it depends very much on your players and what approach your group is comfortable with. I would suggest that the first thing you do is, as soon as you are aware of the fact you have a player or players who cannot attend a session, you should sit down with the rest of your players, have a frank discussion about whether you're going to run the session, and if so, what form it's going to take, or whether you're going to reschedule. It's better to have this conversation as soon as possible. Find out what approach suits your gaming group best. Sound out your players as to what they would prefer. Personally, I tend to reschedule if it's more than one player who cannot make it, since I generally have a group of 4 to 6 players, unless running a side quest or flashback is feasible, in which case I may do that. If there's only a single person who cannot attend, then I tend to soldier on, by preference trying to find a plot to remove that character from the action. If that's not possible, I generally take control of the character, but really keep them in the background and out of center stage for the session, doing my best to keep them out of harm's way. Now, every gaming group is different, and it can take a little while for you to find the solution that is right for your particular group. Never be afraid to sit down with your players and talk about what you're going to do if one of them can't make it or two of them can't make it. Always ask your players for feedback and for their opinions on the game. It'll make them feel invested in the game and like they have a stake in it. And whatever solution you arrive at, the players will be more willing to buy into it if they were involved in it from the very start. And this results in a smoother gaming experience and a more enjoyable game for everyone. And that's what we want at the end of the day. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video and that if you've liked it, you'll click on like and subscribe below. If you have any comments, perhaps on what to do with regards to absentee players, or maybe you have some other suggestions for how to deal with this situation, please put them in the comment box below or on Google+. Either way, until I return in the next video and see you all again, I look forward to reading what you write. Thank you very much for listening.